The palace thought the feud between Prince Harry and Prince William was already broken beyond repair, but nobody expected it to spiral into a full-blown security crisis involving secret midnight messages, emergency consultations inside Kensington Palace, and chilling fears that the monarchy's private walls were no longer secure. What began as Harry's desperate plea for protection reportedly triggered something far darker behind royal gates, because just as the request landed, insiders claim explosive new evidence surfaced that changed everything William thought he knew about his own brother. The message allegedly arrived through one of the most protected communication systems still operating inside the royal household. No ordinary emails, no routine palace channels. This was reportedly delivered in near total secrecy just before midnight, bypassing several layers of traditional administration, immediately setting off alarm bells among senior aides already exhausted by months of internal tension. And according to whispers spreading through palace corridors, the language used inside the request sounded panicked, urgent, almost desperate. Harry reportedly feared returning to Britain without enhanced protection, but insiders say William's reaction was not emotional sympathy. It was ice-cold silence, the kind of silence that makes veteran royal staff nervous, because according to palace insiders, William had just reviewed briefing materials tied to fresh security concerns, and those findings allegedly changed the entire tone of the crisis. Suddenly, this was no longer viewed as another emotional argument between two feuding brothers. This had become institutional, dangerous, potentially explosive. Security advisors were reportedly rushed into emergency consultations deep inside Kensington Palace, while legal teams connected to royal protection structures were ordered to remain on standby. Staff members allegedly watched senior figures entering palace offices long after midnight on consecutive evenings. Nobody knew exactly what had triggered the escalation, and that uncertainty only made the atmosphere more terrifying. Then came the silence. Not normal royal silence, this was different. Palace leaks suddenly stopped. Friendly briefings to newspapers disappeared overnight. Even royal correspondents reportedly noticed something strange happening behind the scenes. Internal conversations around Harry's security situation allegedly froze entirely for nearly 48 hours. And when the palace goes quiet like that, insiders know one thing: panic is usually hiding somewhere beneath the surface. According to various reports circulating among royal commentators, William refused to immediately approve Harry's request until further intelligence reviews could be completed. That decision reportedly stunned several people inside the broader royal network, because despite everything that had happened between the brothers, many still believed family emotion would eventually override institutional protocol. But insiders whisper William no longer saw Harry's situation through the lens of family heartbreak. He allegedly viewed it as a crisis involving trust itself, trust in the monarchy's private communications, trust in royal coordination systems, trust in whether sensitive information surrounding palace operations could still remain protected. And then came the reports that turned palace anxiety into outright fear. Security officials allegedly discovered troubling vulnerabilities involving sensitive logistical information connected to royal movements appearing outside protected channels. Nothing has been officially confirmed, but according to insiders, investigators became increasingly alarmed by irregularities tied to private communications and scheduling details. The implications reportedly horrified senior aides, because if fragments of confidential palace coordination were somehow leaking into wider circulation, then the monarchy's invisible shield of secrecy, the very machinery protecting the institution, might no longer be secure. Princess Catherine was reportedly present during several late-night discussions, quietly standing beside William as advisors moved in and out of private rooms inside Kensington Palace. Observers later noticed Catherine appearing unusually serious during public engagements, fueling even more speculation that the situation had become deeply personal behind closed doors. Insiders claim William and Catherine increasingly viewed the crisis not as a simple security dispute, but as part of a much larger fracture threatening the fragile trust still holding the House of Windsor together. Outside the palace, the public saw headlines about security arguments and family tension, but inside royal corridors, something colder was taking shape, because according to palace veterans, this was never only about taxpayer-funded protection. The monarchy's greatest fear had allegedly become exposure itself. Years of interviews, documentaries, memoirs, and public accusations had already shattered decades of royal silence. Every revelation reportedly sent shockwaves through palace operations, and insiders whisper one terrifying question began haunting senior aides behind the scenes: if private royal conflicts could become global entertainment overnight, what exactly inside the monarchy was still safe anymore? What reportedly happened next inside Kensington Palace completely shattered the last remaining illusion that this crisis was simply about two brothers daughters refusing to reconcile. According to royal insiders, once the confidential findings reached William directly, the atmosphere inside palace corridors turned glacial. No emotional compromises, no quiet brotherly intervention, no exceptions. Insiders claim the future king made one brutal calculation behind closed doors: the monarchy itself had to come before family emotion. And for many inside the House of Windsor, that realization landed like an earthquake. According to sources close to royal operations, William refused to personally intervene in Harry's emergency security appeal despite growing pressure from multiple directions. Critics later described the move as ruthless, cold, even heartless, but palace veterans reportedly saw something completely different unfolding. To them, William's response mirrored the same iron discipline Queen Elizabeth II displayed during constitutional crises throughout her reign. The monarchy survives, insiders whispered, because senior royals are willing to sacrifice personal feelings for institutional stability. And according to those inside Kensington Palace, that exact mentality had now fully consumed William's thinking. Senior aides were reportedly instructed to follow official procedures only. No private arrangements. No informal negotiations. No emotional shortcuts. That decision allegedly stunned some palace figures who still secretly hoped William and Harry might someday repair the fracture between them. But insiders claim the future king had become deeply terrified of allowing emotional pressure to weaken royal authority itself. The message delivered behind closed doors reportedly became brutally simple: protocol rules everything now. Family comes second. And then another phrase allegedly started spreading quietly among institutional loyalists inside palace walls: duty over blood. Never officially spoken, never publicly acknowledged, but according to multiple insiders, those three words perfectly captured the chilling mentality now shaping the monarchy's future direction. William reportedly believed the institution had entered survival mode. Trust had become currency. Loyalty had become infrastructure. And emotional compromise was increasingly viewed as a dangerous risk the monarchy could no longer afford. Princess Catherine reportedly stood firmly beside William throughout the crisis. While she publicly maintained her calm, composed image, insiders claim she quietly supported maintaining strict institutional boundaries around Harry's request. Those familiar with palace dynamics whisper that Catherine increasingly sees stability itself as sacred, particularly as William moves closer toward the throne during one of the monarchy's most fragile modern periods. Royal commentators even began comparing William's handling of the crisis to Queen Elizabeth II's legendary refusal to allow personal pain to destabilize the crown. And according to insiders, William has studied those lessons carefully for years. Meanwhile, Harry's world reportedly became smaller, colder, and increasingly isolated. Palace observers claim the prince, who once moved through royal corridors protected by one of the most sophisticated security structures on Earth, now finds himself emotionally stranded between two realities. No longer fully inside the monarchy, yet never truly free from its shadow. According to commentators close to the situation, Harry allegedly believes he's being forced into an impossible position, expected to maintain royal visibility while no longer receiving the institutional protections historically attached to his role. And with every failed legal challenge and every rejected appeal, insiders say his sense of abandonment only deepened. The emotional blow reportedly became even heavier after William's refusal to personally intervene. Palace observers claim Harry once believed there was still an invisible bridge connecting him to the family he left behind. But as tensions hardened inside Kensington Palace, that bridge allegedly began collapsing completely. Conversations between Harry and senior royals reportedly became infrequent, tightly managed, and increasingly formal. Even moments that once might have allowed reconciliation now appeared poisoned by suspicion and caution. Questions surrounding Harry's future visits to Britain only intensified the fear. According to royal commentators, security concerns now dominate nearly every discussion tied to his potential return. But insiders whisper the issue is no longer logistical. It's symbolic. Every appearance, every negotiation, every request for protection is now viewed through the lens of institutional trust and unresolved betrayal. Some insiders even claim Harry feels psychologically trapped between two countries, unable to fully reconnect with Britain, yet unable to escape the royal identity following him across the Atlantic. At the same time, former palace allies reportedly began quietly stepping away from the increasingly toxic situation. Figures once viewed as sympathetic intermediaries allegedly retreated from direct involvement as tensions escalated behind the scenes. And inside the monarchy, absence often speaks louder than confrontation. The silence surrounding Harry reportedly became deafening. Public sympathy also began splitting aggressively in different directions. arrogance. Some still viewed Harry as a wounded prince abandoned by a ruthless institution. Others increasingly saw him as a destabilizing force whose public battles had weakened the monarchy during one of its most vulnerable eras. And then came the deeper constitutional fear haunting Kensington Palace. Because according to insiders, William reportedly believed making special exceptions for Harry's protection could create a catastrophic precedent for the future monarchy itself. Palace advisors allegedly warned that once emotional pressure starts reshaping royal protocols, institutional authority begins eroding from within. The crown, insiders whispered, cannot negotiate through pressure. That principle reportedly became the foundation of William's hardline stance. Inside royal corridors, comparisons to previous constitutional disasters allegedly started surfacing among senior aides. Some reportedly referenced Edward VIII's abdication crisis when personal desires threatened institutional stability. Others pointed toward Queen Elizabeth II's ruthless emotional restraint during family scandals that endangered royal credibility. William, insiders claim, increasingly viewed himself through that same historical lens, not as a brother protecting Harry, but as the future king protecting the monarchy from instability itself. At the center of the emotional collapse stood King Charles III, reportedly exhausted by the endless war consuming both his reign and his family. According to insiders, Charles desperately wanted peace between his sons. There were allegedly quiet attempts at mediation away from public view, efforts to reduce hostility, efforts to soften William's position. But as fears surrounding institutional vulnerability intensified, those hopes reportedly began dying behind palace walls. The emotional burden on Charles allegedly became overwhelming. Already battling serious health concerns while trying to stabilize public confidence in the crown, the king reportedly found himself trapped between fatherhood and monarchy. Princess Anne and William allegedly pushed firmly for institutional discipline despite the emotional consequences. Anne, insiders claim, warned repeatedly against allowing personal pressure to weaken royal structures surrounding hierarchy and security. Together, William and Anne reportedly represented a colder philosophy rising inside the monarchy, one rooted not in anger, but survival. And in the end, according to palace insiders, the monarchy made its final choice: continuity over reconciliation, structure over emotion, survival over sentiment. By the close of the crisis, something fundamental inside the House of Windsor had reportedly changed forever. Not publicly, not through dramatic announcements, but quietly, beneath the traditions and carefully controlled appearances, a harder philosophy allegedly took hold inside royal power. William emerged not simply as the heir waiting for the throne, but as the defining force shaping the monarchy's next era.